Could this be a near perfect whiskey? Welcome to another episode of Erik Whiskey Studies, and in this video I'm going to do a review of the Laphroaig Cairdeas Triple Wood Original Cask Strength, bottled at 59.5% alcohol by volume. Now, a lot of us whiskey tubers like to give scores to our whiskeys. However, I found a lot of whiskey tubers just sort of throw a number out there without really explaining or justifying as to why they give it a score. So one of the most important things I like to do is explain why I rate whiskeys the way I do. So in this video, in addition to reviewing this whiskeys, I'm going to lay out a basic profile of what I am looking for in a whiskey and why I give them the score that I do. But before I get into this whiskey, here are my notes.
Cairdeas means friendship in Gaelic, and each year a limited edition bottling is crafted by distillery manager and 5th generation Islay native John Campbell. The Cairdeas Triple Wood Cask Strength Islay Single Malt Scotch Whisky undergoes a triple maturation. First matured in ex-bourbon barrels, then in quarter casks, and finally in European oak casks, which previously held Oloroso sherry. It is then barrier filtered and bottled at cask strength to create a punchy dram with Laphroaig's signature richness of flavor and smoky taste. It is bottled at 59.9% alcohol by volume. The distillery retailed it at 63.4 euros, and in the United States, prices range anywhere between $75 and $100.
Now, of course, there's always a certain subjective element in rating a whiskey or a wine, and even top, say, wine critics such as Robert Parker have acknowledged that. And people say, if you're not familiar with Robert Parker, he is the one that gave us the 100-point score rating. And wine was then carried over into whiskey, and he was the founder of the Wine Advocate, and then other magazines such as the Whiskey Advocate sort of borrowed his name of his magazine and then claimed it for a whiskey, but there's no relation between the two. So Robert Parker acknowledges that, yeah, there is a certain subjective element to it. There is an emotional response to when you're reviewing a wine in his case, or say in a whiskey in this case. But I do believe there is a certain amount of objectivity in rating a whiskey. There are certain things that should be there to really make it stand out. And while point scores can vary within, say, a few numbers, if you look at professional whiskey reviewers, those that aren't being paid or somehow receiving a dividend to put their whiskey on the cover of their book, I think we all know who I'm talking about. More or less, if you're doing a blind tasting and you maybe know what the category of the whiskey is, should be able to get within the same ballpark of those people who really know what they're talking about. So I'm going to lay out my criteria for what I really look for in a whiskey. Of course, what you're looking for in a whiskey can depend, of course, on the style of whiskey, right? There are different things you look for in a bourbon than you look for in a Japanese whiskey, or look for in a peated scotch or a non-peated scotch or a Canadian whiskey and so forth. But here are my 5 basic areas of critiquing a whiskey. The first is a whiskey can be sweet, a whiskey can be savory, and a whiskey can have a salty character. The trifecta, the one that really rings my bell, is when you have a whiskey that is sweet, savory, and salty. Sweet and savory is sort of a magical combination in the culinary world. So when you're pairing, say, wines and whiskeys, you're looking for certain elements in the food, and you're going to counterbalance them with a wine. So, for example, super spicy Indian food, Asian food, you then maybe counterbalance the spice with an off-dry wine, and that gives you a greater complexity. Likewise, in barbecue, when you think barbecue sauce or barbecue rub, you have all these elements. You have the savory elements of the meat. You have the salty character, because you can use like kosher salt. You're going to have the sweet character of the sauce, and you're going to have savory notes in terms of the spices as well, right? So you really have all these elements that really come into play in barbecue, which is why it's so popular here in the United States. Well, if I can find that in a whiskey, then man, I am absolutely in heaven. The second issue is whether it has well integrated peat and smoke. Now, of course, I'm talking about a peated smoky whiskey. There are plenty that are not peated or smoky, your heavily sherried whiskeys, or just your straight out, Highland or Speyside bourbon cask, or even Lowland. But when we're talking about a peated whiskey, as much as I might like, a smack in the face and a big peat smoke bomb, I prefer it. What really, really gets me is when the peat and the smoke is well integrated with the other aromas and flavors, so that you get the smoke and the peat, which might come across as, say, as chocolate character. When it's really intermingled with all the characteristics, so it provides layers of flavor, that is the way I really like my smoke. The third is if it has a wide range of flavors. We might refer to that as complexity. It's not just a simple one chord song, Imagine a guitarist that's only playing the G chord, all the way through, right? While we might like some heavy metal or hard rock and roll songs that only use 3 chords, we're more impressed by someone who has a lot of layers of complexity and flavor. So if you have, fruit, floral, spice, meat, maybe some candy notes and chocolate and oceanic character, those are whiskeys that really take us on a ride and provide a huge, a wide array of experiences in going through the whiskey and having these different aromas and flavors. And sort of going along with that is fourth is a long development of flavor. So I really prefer a whiskey that gives me something different on entry, in the middle, and in the finish. Now, a lot of great whiskeys might be pretty much the same, from entry into the mid and into the finish. And they can be really, really nice, really, really enjoyable. But if they can give me something a little bit different, something that gives me a ride, a range of experience in which after you've taken that sip, you're just sort of sitting there and experiencing it and experiencing it, as it goes through the range of flavors, that, for me, gives it extra points. And the fifth thing, of course, about a whiskey is, does it give you that wow experience? Is it something that sort of makes you forget everything else that's going on around you and just makes you stop, and for that moment, just focus on nothing else but the whiskey of that glass in front of you? These are whiskeys that you don't just go, wham, bam, thank you for the dram, or something that you're necessarily going to be drinking while you're in deep conversation or watching a movie, right? Something which is really going to be quite distracting and really grab a hold of you, and one that is really going to stick in your memory for years and years and years. You're still going to think back to that time when you had that whiskey, and it's almost as if you're experiencing it again. There are very few whiskeys that are like that, but those are the whiskeys that I consider have the wow factor. Alrighty, so what do I get in this whiskey? Does this meet this criteria? Well, first of all, it definitely has the sweet, savory, and salty character. I get chocolate notes. I get a barbecue character to it. It does have a salty sea breeze note. It does have, in terms of the sweetness factor, like a melted Snickers bar. But it also has elements that remind me of a barbecue rub and some other savory notes, or umami notes, that I can't precisely describe. I can't think of anything outside of what I'm finding in here that it exactly relates to. But it's there. It's something that, it's not just all sugar, 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 or all floral, floral, floral. It's something else that appeals to a different element of the palate. It also has really well integrated. I'm not getting smacked upside the head with smoke and peat. It is there, but it is interwoven with all the other characteristics. And it does have a wide array of aromas. It doesn't have any floral notes, but it does have fruit. I would say sort of a grilled stone fruits, grilled peaches, some lemon, some lime, apple, pear. So you have some stone fruit and some tree fruit. Definitely has some spice, some barbecue spices, a little light black pepper, some herbs. It does have a meatiness there, which I absolutely love. And it does have that candy note there, like I mentioned before, like a melted Snickers bar, and whether it was a chocolate, and that salty character as well. So on the nose, it's absolutely making my mouth water as I'm standing and holding it. All right, on the palate. Wow. It has the wow factor. It has a huge development. So I could probably sit in front of, and I would bore you to death doing it, but I could sit in front of camera for the next 10 minutes and not take another sip, and I'd still be tasting it. This one goes on and on and on. So right now, I've got it down here below the shoulder, but I would say this whiskey straight from the neck was, boom, absolutely awesome. While it is improving and opening up more as I get past the shoulder, this was not a whiskey that I had to wait for a real long time.
2,000 years later.
And remind me to put it as a sick element. If you have a whiskey that is this complex, this rich, this delicious, and is under $100, then this is an absolute must buy. In fact, it's not only a must buy, it's if you can get a second bottle, grab a second bottle. This is one of those rare moments where you have a whiskey that has a real high quality price ratio, it is still available, and I'm gonna say jump on it. Because, to be honest with you, I found out about this bottle from Scott and Bart at Scotch Test Dummies, and before just from their review, before the video, I finished watching the video, I was already online looking for a bottle, and I was able to find a shop here in California that was able to get me one. So I want to say thanks to Scott and Bart, you Scotch Test Dummies, for getting me the tip on getting a bottle of this. So I'm sort of repeating for others. But this is an absolute fantastic bottle, and I would say it's probably a contender for one of my top 10 for 2020. Now, what am I going to give this in terms of a score? I'm going to go 95 points. 95 points. This is absolutely spectacular, and the fact that it's under $100 makes this an absolute must buy. So, now that you're watching the end of the video, subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, share with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and other social networking channels. Hit the bell to be notified when I go live or post another video, and search online right now, Google it, and see if you can find yourself a bottle, because trust me, this is a bottle you're going to want to have in your whiskey collection. All right, until next time, cheers.
Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.